Hey gang, welcome back to another video. Unfortunately, I'm very sorry for those who follow me that I haven't been uploading recently. If you've been wondering where I am, I have been trying to edit videos, and I promise you, I have been on that YouTube grind or whatever I used to call it. In short version, I didn't like the quality of uploads that I had, so even my past few uploads that I've had, I didn't really like what I was editing. I would finish a video and then I'd look back on it and then I would just hate it, so I'd delete it entirely. Before we get into our mid-year book review, because that is what this video is, basically what I'm going to say is I'm changing my schedule. If you notice I had a schedule, I try to post every Sunday, but now I'm going to change that to every other Sunday. Alright, now that we got our boring stuff out of the way, hello, welcome to my mid-year book recap, book check, book tag, whatever you want to call it. I am what people would call a newbie reader. Keep that in mind as we go through this video. I know we see a lot of people on social media that reads 100 books a year, or they try to, and that's not realistic for me, especially as a newbie, so please keep that in mind. But we do have a lot of stuff to get through, so let's just skip like a introduction and go into my book progress of this year. Alright, first things first, let's talk about my reading goal. My total book goal this year was to read 12 books, a book for each month, and I'm happy to say that I passed that already with reading 12 books. Goodreads says 13, but technically I DNF'd one book, so I'm making great progress, and we'll see if by the end of the year I read 24 books. Like I said earlier, I did DNF one book, and that was Sweet Nightmare by Tracy Wolff. I'll be talking about the reasons I DNF'd that book in a later book vlog of everything I read in the summer that should come out around September, I think. I gave a 5-star rating to 4 books, that being The Battle of Songbirds and Snakes by Suzanne Collins, The Hawthorne Legacy by Jennifer Lynn Barnes, Powerless by Lauren Roberts, and Reckless by Lauren Roberts. The total number of books I rated 4 stars were 5, which were The Inheritance Games and The Final Gambit by Jennifer Lynn Barnes, which is in the Inheritance Game series. One of Us is Lying by Karen and Mick. Ruthless Vows by Rebecca Ross, and Powerful by Lauren Roberts. The total of books I gave 3 stars were 3, and that was Never Let Me Go by Kazuo Ishiguro, Divergent by Veronica Roth, and Divine Rivals by Rebecca Ross. And I didn't give any book 0 or 1 stars, so. The longest book that took me to read was The Battle of Songbirds and Snakes by Suzanne Collins. That book took me 9 months to read, but that was the book that really got me starting into this rabid book journey that I've had, so everyone say thank you to Battle of Songbirds and Snakes. Ironically, the shortest book it took me to read was actually only 9 hours. That was Reckless by Lauren Roberts, which I actually read a few days ago as I'm recording this. My favorite book right now, I don't think I have one. I would tell you Powerless, but reading Reckless has it's made me think about things, so we'll just say I don't have one right now to make it safe. My least favorite book that I read this year was Divergent. I talked about that in my April reading recap, so you can go watch that, and I also talk about other books that you'll see in this video. My favorite author would probably be Lauren Roberts, because I love her dialogue, but then for writing, I think Suzanne Collins. I always love her books. My biggest disappointment this year was Divine Rivals by Rebecca Ross. I remember seeing this book in the store before I really saw it hyped up on Book Talk. I searched it up, and when I went to go get it at the store, I heard how great this book was and how it was really romantic, but also fantasy and all this stuff. It was kind of a different vibe to a lot of fantasies where the hero is usually someone who is very warrior-like. So I was really looking forward to this book, but unfortunately it did disappoint, and I did also talk about that in my April reading recap. Again, ironically, my biggest surprise was Ruthless Vows by Rebecca Ross, which is the second book in the Divine Rivals duology. I was expecting Ruthless Vows to kind of end up how Divine Rivals was for me, and it was also worse because everyone on the internet was saying this book was terrible compared to Divine Rivals, and they usually like Divine Rivals, so I was like, oh no, if I didn't like Divine Rivals, then I don't think I'm gonna like Ruthless Vows, but it was the opposite. I actually ended up really liking Ruthless Vows, especially out of the two. The books that I cried the most to, that award, we are giving it to Powerless. It's really obvious if you have read the series, even if it's not your favorites in terms of books or fantasies and stuff like that. the characters, it's really easy to love the characters, at least from my point of view, and especially a certain character, it's so easy to fall in love with her. And then the ending just kind of, it makes you cry a lot. I also put Powerful in there because I did a tandem reading of Powerless and Powerful before Reckless came out. And so at the same time I was crying for Powerless, I was also crying for Powerful, so those two books. My favorite characters were Adina from Powerless, and then also Xander Hawthorne from the Inheritance game series. My least favorite characters, I have Eve from the Inheritance game series, specifically from the Final Gambit. Annoying. And then also Triss from Divergent, which is a little shocking since she is the lead in Divergent, but I think the biggest reason why I didn't like Divergent, and I it was one of the books I gave 3 stars, which I also talk in my April reading recap, is just because I couldn't really like her character. So now that I've talked about all the books I read during the first half of 2024, let's talk about all the books that I am planning to read during the second half of 2024. So, anticipated book series, I want to talk about that real quick because I am going to college, so I'm trying to pick up book series that I can buy before. So some of them are a little bit more cheaper because they're shorter or they're paperbacks already. I don't know if that matters. But anyways, book series that I am really excited to read is The Natural series by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. If you don't know The Natural series, basically it's like if Criminal Minds meets YA. That's like how everyone describes it. I already read The Inheritance Games by Jennifer Lynn Barnes, so I'm familiar with her writing, and I really do like how she writes. It's pretty easy, but also entertaining. And then the other series I want to read, it is called Renegades. But the way I discovered about this book is I was talking to my friend, and I was basically telling her, like, I really want to find this really niche trope in a book. And she was like, oh, I know that book. And so she told me Renegades. And so I'm very excited to read that book eventually during the second half of 2024. Before we get far into the second half, let me talk about my physical TBR right now because I have 4 physical books on my TBR. The first book we have is A Good Girl's Guide to Murder by Holly Jackson. I actually started reading this book in May, but then I had to temporarily DNF it because I was getting a book slump since I was graduating, and so I was kind of just like overwhelmed with life. Next book we have is Better Than the Movies by Lynn Painter. This is a super popular book talk book that a lot of people love. This is the first straight up romance book that I will be reading, which I'm not nervous for because I read a bunch of romance webtoons. Like literally the only thing I read on webtoon is romance and thrillers and thriller romances. Next book I have, another romance book. It's called The Summer of Broken Rules, but to fulfill my fantasy urge to read, I did grab a fantasy book, The Six of Crows. I've heard great things about this book too. Again, all the books I have are book talk books. I'm excited to read this one because I heard it's more hardcore fantasy. Like there's a bit subplot of romance I've heard, but I really wanted books that had less romance in it, especially fantasies. Anyways, I hope you guys stay cozy, safe, and happy, and I'll see you guys in 2 weeks.